welcome to Fields and Views, the building blocks of Drupal, or as I affectionately like to call it, how I learned to build a mini fertilizer bomb using WD-40 from watching MacGyver. And my Swiss Army knife, can't forget that part. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. You'll understand the analogy there, but basically the story behind that is when I was a kid, MacGyver was my favorite show, and I used to watch it all the time. My parents got me my little Swiss Army knife when I turned like 8 or 9 Scouts and got my whittling chip. So lo and behold, one day I'm out and about, with all the kids in the neighborhood, and I get this great idea from this episode of MacGyver I watched. I said, hey, let's go take all the stuff in my dad's garage. He's got fertilizer, he's got WD-40 and newspaper and twine and duct tape, and we'll build these little smoke bombs like I saw MacGyver do the other night. So we took all these ingredients, we put them all together, we did everything that we were supposed to do watching MacGyver, cutting everything with our little Swiss Army knives, and we take them out to go start lighting them and throwing them, and fortunately it didn't work. And the thing they don't tell you when you're 8 years old is that they leave a bunch of the science out of MacGyver so that people don't go do stupid stuff like that. But it was great fun, and it is a good example of kind of the process behind Drupal. You got to take all these different parts and put them together, and when you do that, you're going to get a site that hopefully explodes into a vast amount of usefulness. And that's really what fields and views are. They're the building blocks of all of Drupal. So who am I? My name is Adam Gregory. I am a developer, a consultant, a themer, a trainer. I've been using Drupal for about 8+ years. I really kind of got on Drupal right when Drupal 5 came out. So now we're on Drupal 8, and it's been, I think about 8 years. So I got into it for a lot of reasons, probably a lot like most of you guys that are out here to learn it. It really just seemed like a system that had so much potential, and it seemed like a system that I would be able to use for so many different things as opposed to something like WordPress or Joomla or some of the other content systems out there. Drupal, to me, just really, when I was looking at it as a PHP developer, was a system that had so much potential to be able to do so many different things. And that was back in Drupal 5. Where we're at now in Drupal 7 and with the upcoming Drupal 8, it's just gotten so much better. So what we're going to be looking at today with Drupal 7 and fields and views and that is just light years from where it was years ago when I started, and it's really just going to give you a great idea of how things work. I build and maintain numerous modules on Drupal.org. You can find me at my username, Arcane Adam. I've been involved in Drupal projects large and small, so I really know what I'm talking about. I've worked with companies like AT&T, I've worked with Red Hat, I've worked with small local businesses to be able to build their websites in Drupal, so it's the vast scale of things. And then currently, right now, I'm a senior Drupal developer at Classic Graphics. We're one of the platinum sponsors here, so if you want to know what we do, we can talk about that, but mainly we just do a lot of printing and in-house stuff, so we don't build a lot of client-facing Drupal sites, but we do a lot of things with APIs and behind-the-scenes type stuff with Drupal. So what we're going to cover. We're going to cover what fields and views are, obviously. That's the whole point of this course. Mainly, just touch on it real quick, fields are how you get your data in, and views is how you pull your data out and display it. We're going to talk about how they relate and complement each other and how they really work together. And then we're going to actually do some practical examples and a demonstration. I'm going to actually pull up the demo site that I have set up on my computer and show you guys and walk you through. This is how we add fields to things. This is how we create these kind of custom content types. And then this is how we use views to display it in all sorts of creative ways. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll go through a Q&A, and as always in any of my sessions, if you have questions, feel free to hang out afterwards or catch me in the hallway. I'm not doing anything else today, so I'll have plenty of time to answer any questions you have. So, what are fields and views? As you can see, they're the fertilizer and the WD-40. They're the two reactant ingredients. You combine them, your website goes boom. You get all sorts of great functionality out of it. So the first thing we'll talk about is fields. Fields in Drupal is how you get your data in. If you've ever done anything with a database or any sort of just even form entry on a website, if you've ever filled out a contact us form on a website, that's essentially what fields do in Drupal. They give you as a website administrator or a user or just an anonymous person browsing your website a way to input data into the Drupal system in all sorts of customizable ways. You can do things like set up an event using a date field. You can create a file upload. You can create tags for things or categorize things using Drupal's taxonomy system and its taxonomy fields. So it creates this vast array of ways to input data into the Drupal system. Now, we're only going to cover kind of the basics of it today, but there's a lot of ways in Drupal 7 and especially in Drupal 8 that you can use fields. Today we're just going to kind of cover how they relate to content types and nodes, but there's an overall concept in Drupal called entities, which is basically a concept where you can attach fields to almost any object, and that's a little more advanced, but just know that fields are useful beyond even just sort of nodes and stuff like that. You can attach them base out of the system. You can also attach them to users, so you can attach first name and last name to a user. You could attach a birth date. You could attach things like that. So you can actually get useful information about who's using your site and their demographics and stuff like that. And then mainly they provide the input widgets and then to some extent output formats. So for example, with your date, it's going to provide you, I'm going to use an example of a pop-up calendar, and then the output format, you're going to have the choice to pick, how you want to display that date. Do you want to display it as Monday, October 19th, 2015 at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or do you just want to display it as 10/19/2015? So it's going to give you a lot of different output stuff like that. So we talked about how to get the data in. Now we're going to talk about how do we get the data out and display it. Because all that data that you just collected, let's say if you're creating an event calendar, all those events you just collected aren't going to do you any good unless you can then display them back to the user in some sort of friendly way, or even just yourself. So that's where views comes in. It is, as you see the top thing there, it is the most widely used module in Drupal. I don't know if the actual statistical numbers on Drupal.org show it as being the most downloaded module, but it is. Every Drupal website that does anything good uses views. If you have a blog, you use views. If you have an event calendar, you're going to use views. If you're going to list any of your content anywhere on Drupal, you're going to use views. So it's been around since Drupal 5. It's come light years, and it's just the best module out there. So essentially what it is it's at the beginner base level, it's a user interface for you to pick and choose what data you want to display and how you want to display it. As you get into way more advanced levels, and if you're a programmer in here, it gives you all sorts of APIs and templating that you can use and that you can basically hook into the system to override default stuff, create your own styles, create your own outputs, a lot of more advanced stuff like that. Some of the different display styles, it gives you the option of, you can just out of the box, you can display stuff in a list. So, you just list your different pages available or your different events. You can display stuff in a typical HTML table. So if you've got actual data, that you want to display in a data table, you can do that pretty easily. It'll let you display stuff in a not fluid grid, it's not a CSS fluid grid, but in using divs to display it in grids across the page. So think like Amazon or a shopping cart sort of display. It can do slideshows with various module plugins and stuff that you can drop into it. You can create a slideshow. So you could set up your content type using the image and the file field to have people upload an image, and then you use views to then display all those images in a slideshow. And then you can do even maps and stuff too with some of the location plugins. And even those are really, they're really just incredibly useful with how much functionality they provide. You know, you can really build some pretty complicated mapping functionality without having to do almost any programming at all, if you can just take your time to learn the UI and the configuration functions. So it's going to allow you really to choose the data to display. It's going to give you options to filter it based on certain qualities, and those filters will actually be things that you can set in as an administrator, or you can display the filters to users as well. So once again, think Amazon and the whole list of filters down their website, like department and price and stars and stuff like that. Views gives you the ability to use those filters and create those filters, and then give the end user the option to set them as well. And then sort, you know, just like you can do with anything. You can sort by like price or relevance or stuff like that. And then you can combine results in all sorts of ways too. So just to kind of retouch this stuff, how do they relate to each other? Once again, views as input, or fields as input, views as output. Any sort of software application that's going to be used by somebody, you're going to have a way to get your data in and then redisplay that data for other people. And that's how the two work together. They integrate together out of the box. So you don't have to get any sort of other plugins or modules. You just, you know, Drupal 7 comes out of the box with fields. You download views, it works. Drupal 8, views is built in. They've moved views into core because it's so useful, and it's I've never seen a Drupal site that doesn't have it. So in Drupal 8, you don't even have to download anything. It just comes straight out of the box with it. And then they have tons more integration available through other modules, whether it's calendar displays or maps or slideshows or almost anything you can think of. Any way that you would want to display some data, Views probably has a module that'll help you do that. So I'm going to do some practical examples now. Let's build some bombs, or not, but let's build some views and fields and see how that works. So I'm going to pull up our demonstration website here. And so the first thing we're going to do, I don't know how many of you are, I'm going to start this with the base assumption that you've all at least had the experience of downloading Drupal and setting up a Drupal website. There's a couple things that'll be a little different just because of how I like it. For one, the administration bar is a custom module that you can download, admin menu. I like it a lot better than the default Drupal menu bar. So the first thing we're going to do is create a content type. Out of the box, Drupal comes with just basic article and basic page. You can think of article like a blog post or a news thing, and basic page is, you know, just pages. But for our examples, we're going to actually just build a quick event listing. We're not going to display it on a calendar or anything like that, but we're going to build an event content type, and then we're going to build a list of upcoming events in views. So the first thing we got to do is we got to create that content type. So we're just going to call this thing event. So when you do that, it's going to give you the option to either save the content type or save and add fields. In this case, we're going to save and add fields. Or if you were in the list of content types, I'll just go there real quick, you can see that you've got the option to edit or to just manage the fields. So manage fields is really where you're going to do all of the field work. So out of the box, every field type or every content type you create in Drupal through the UI is going to have a title and a body. That works for us because obviously our event's going to have a title, and our body, we're going to actually change the label on it so it says description, because that makes more sense for an event. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is add a date field, because you can't have an event if you don't tell people when it is. So we're going to create a date. And then so over here, we will have our options of, did I not turn it on? Well, I guess I should probably turn on the date field. All right, so now we should have that available. All right, so the first thing we'll do is we will select a date. Now you've got a couple different date formats. You know, if for some reason you want to store your dates in Unix time format, you can do that. But we just want to store it in normal. Now remember earlier I talked about it gives you a couple things with fields. You get a couple things where you've got widgets that you can pick from of how to input that data, and then you'll have formats of how to display it. So right here, the widget gives us some options on how we want people to be able to choose. Pop-up calendars are a nice, easy way for people to be able to input dates, so that's good. But you also have the option, you could just do a text box, which nobody really likes that, or select boxes as well, where it's a drop-down of all the months, a drop-down of all the days, and then you type in the year and stuff. But we're going to keep it with pop-up calendars because that's a nice, sexy UI. So you go in, and then you have the options with date. You can set how much or how little of the date you want to collect. If we want to collect down to the second, we could. If we just want to collect the year and the month, we could. So, you know, if you were adding this to a user and you just wanted to know, hey, what's your birth month and year, you could do that. And then with the date, you also have the option to collect an end date as well. So if you wanted to create events that have a start and an end. It gets a little more convoluted when you start to do that and how you set up your views and stuff. So for now, we're not going to do that. And then time zones with Drupal out of the box, you kind of have some options with time zone where you can allow users to set their own time zone. Really convoluted. I would highly advise never really doing that unless you really know why you want to do that. So we're just going to keep it with sites time zone. I'm going to save the field settings. So every time you create a field, it's going to give you a label, which is simply what it's going to say above that field when the user's inputting the data. So for this, you know, we could leave it at date, but maybe we want to be a little more specific and we want to say event date. And then help text just gives you the option, and it's all this little stuff right here. You know, the stuff that's below the fields. It gives you little text that you can put under there. So if you've got kind of a field that maybe has, you need to explain something to the user about what it's about, you would put that in help text. And then required fields, basically if you click that, then you're going to get this little red star up there, the red asterisk, that's going to let people know that they have to fill this field out if they're going to save the node. And it will make them. It's not something that happens on the front end. There is front end looks to it, but it happens on the back end, so it won't ever actually save anything, and they can't bypass that. So it's always a good idea if you're doing that. In here, we've got some more values, you know, how many years you want it available, the time increments, a lot of different stuff like that. For the most part, you can usually just leave that alone unless you get some specific requests. And then we just have a rehash of the info from the first page, with the exception of this number of values. Drupal gives you the option with fields to collect more than one value. Where would that be useful? Something like tags or categories, for example, that might be useful to have more than one value. With dates, there might be some scenarios where you'd want that. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe if you were doing sort of like a repeating event or something like that, but there's other options available for that. But just think of it in the terms of like if categories and tags on like a blog post, you want people to be able to input more than one sometimes. So it gives you the option to allow anywhere from 1 to 10 or unlimited, so people can just keep adding different things. So we're going to save that, and now we have our event dates field. Now there's a couple other fields that we could also add as well. Maybe we want to add, make sure that it's actually available. So let's say we want to go ahead and let people tag events, so we're going to create a tags field. And we're going to literally set it up with a taxonomy term reference. And then this one gives us the option where we can, a couple different widgets. For this purpose, I'm just going to keep it at autocomplete. And then so when you create a taxonomy term, you have the option to pick which vocabulary. Basically, vocabulary would be like tags, category. If you were doing a shopping cart, maybe you would have product category or gender for whether it was men or women's, or like clothing styles or color or different things like that you could set up as taxonomies. And then, they would show up as different vocabularies. For this one, we only have tags available. So it's the same thing here, and this is where we're going to set it to number of values unlimited, because we want people to tag this event to their heart's desire. But we also didn't set it as required because we don't want to force them to tag it either. All right, so now we've got our event content type set up. So let's go create some. All right, we're going to create an event date. Create this one for tomorrow. Tags, tag 1. And with this widget, if there is no tags, then it just creates them. So now you can see we've got our first event. It's showing us our date, our tags, and our info. Now we're going to create a couple more real quick so we can get into views and how that works. This is the boring part of the session. The only boring part. All the rest of it's really, really interesting. Create one last one. All right, so you can see all the content we've got there. Now, before we get into views, I'm going to show you a couple things, the last things with the content type and the fields there. Remember how I talked about Fields have the ability to give you a widget for the input, and that was that little pop-up calendar was. That was the widget that we chose, was the pop-up calendar for the event date. But then they also give you the format for output. So when we go to manage display, we can actually manage how some of the basic things display. So we can hide the label if we want. We can put the label inline. And then we can also change the format. So over here on the format for date, it gives us the ability to do time ago or plain, which is pretty ugly, or date and time. And when you have some options available in the format, it gives you this little button over here. You can click it, and now we can show how we wanted to display that date. And these are options that are set actually in the Drupal's admin section up here under configuration. You can set a bunch of different formats. So right now they all look the same, but if we wanted to create a new format, we could set it to just display 10, 22, 2015. You know, so right now they're all set the same because that's how it comes out of the box. But that's where you get to set up your different formats. And then with the tags even, you've got the option to set them as a link or just a plain text. So if they click on the tag link, then it'll go to a display of everything that has that tag. Or if you want to just display it as plain text so they can't click on it, you can do that as well. So like actually, let's change that and you'll see. So now, that's not a link. This is just the description label right there showed up. So that's where Fields gives you those options and how to display stuff there. And that'll come into play again when we start using views, because views lets us use the formats that are available for displaying those fields. So now we've got our data in, we've figured out how to do that. Now we want to say, all right, we want to create a page to display upcoming events, or a block, or whatever. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to add a new view. And we're going to call this view events, right? Because that makes sense. Now views will show a lot of different things. You can show content, you can show files, comments, users. The main areas where you're really going to use it is content, because that's really what you're displaying with Drupal. But it has the ability, most anything that's in the Drupal database, as long as somebody has written a API for views to know about it, it can display it. And it can display it however you want. So we're going to show content. When we want to show our events here, obviously, because we don't want articles and stuff getting in there. And we want to show all of the tags. We don't really care about that. And to start off, we're gonna unsort it, and then we're gonna set up a sort so it's actually sorting off the event date when we get into it. Now you've got some options with views. Right when you start, before you even create it, you can say we want to create a page, or we want to create a block. And that's going to give you the ability to kind of do some various things. But once you get into the actual Views UI, you're going to have even more options available as well. But this kind of gives you a way to kind of get a head start before you get into the UI of, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. So this works for us. Let's call our page events, and let's leave the URL at events. The formats, this is where I had mentioned earlier, you've got some options in the format that you want to display that data. You can display a grid, an HTML list, which is like bullet points or numbers. A jump menu, which is useful, like if you had a bunch of links, you could display them as a jump menu, and then it'll, when people click it, it would jump to that page or whatever. But that's not useful for us. Table, once again, if you have data, actual data that you want to display in a data table, you could do that. And then unformatted list, which is what we really want to do. And the difference between unformatted list and HTML list, once again, an unformatted list is just content displayed down the page, whereas an HTML list is like an actual bulleted list with numbers or bullet points. So if you're getting into this and you notice, like, why are these bullet points showing up? It's probably because you selected HTML list instead of unformatted list. So this is really where Fields starts to play really well with views. Out of the box with views, you can show the content teaser. You can show the whole entire content. You know, we could have it show this entire amount of info right here. Or we can tell it, you know, we want to see just titles, or we want to see titles that are linked to the field or to the content, or we want to display fields. And that's what we're going to do, because these ones are kind of all self-explanatory about what they do. And they don't really require any sort of configuration on your part because you've already got everything set up there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use fields, and we're going to display all of them. We'll set it up to use a pager, but we don't have enough to page. And then you can also create a menu link, so we'll just leave that, and then that'll set it up. And then you can essentially do the same thing with blocks. Now here is where we would want to go, you know, maybe we change the title list to upcoming events. And we want to display an unformatted list. And here would be useful to only use titles because you don't want to give all of the event information in the block. But you could also do fields here. And really for our purposes, that's probably good too, because if you just give a list of events and you don't put the date next to them in a block, what good is that? And you could set even a block up to use a pager. I don't suggest it. It's bad UI. So then we're going to continue to edit. So this is the main views screen. You're going to see up at the top, we've got the different displays that we already set up. We set up a page. We set up a block. And we could add more if we wanted to. We could add another block. We could add, I didn't actually mean to click that. We could add another, delete that one. So we could add another page, like if we wanted to create past events page, we could do that and then set up the filters and the sorts and stuff to do that. But for now, we're just going to stick with page and our initial block here. So some of the options we've already set in that initial screen. We've already set events. We've already set unformatted list. We've already set fields as what we want to show as opposed to titles or full content. With any of the stuff in here, if it's got settings, you know, you kind of just, sometimes even now after doing this for 4 or 5 years of using this exact UI, I still click the wrong thing sometimes trying to get to certain settings. So the beauty of this is it doesn't save anything. All of your clicks you make through here don't save until you actually hit save. So if you go in here and you mess something completely up and you're like, crap, you can just hit cancel. I mean, you'll lose all of your work that you had done prior to saving, but it also gives you, it keeps you from going in there and inadvertently clicking around on things and changing stuff and then having it auto save in the background. So it won't actually save until you hit save. So as you're starting out, that's a good little thing to think about is, you know, go ahead and make slow changes, save it as you're going so you don't have to lose a lot of work. Because the other wonderful thing it gives you is it gives you this preview down here. And you can either set it to auto preview, so every time you make a change, it updates this preview, or you can set it, you can just click update preview afterwards too. So this is what our thing looks like right now. This is what our page would look like. There's the page title, and then this is what it would list. And right now it's only listing the titles because that's all we've told it to list in fields. So let's do a little bit more than that. Let's add some fields. So we just go here from the fields, and we click add. Now I'm going to filter this down to content because there's a bunch of other stuff in here that's not really useful unless you know what you're doing with it. And so we want to display our description field, and we want to display our event date. And I believe title is already on there, so we don't have to do that. And then if we wanted to here, we could display tags. So we will, just because. So we're going to add those. So now for each of those, it's going to give us the option to set some settings for each field that we just added. So for the description, the default thing is still body, so we do have to go back and change that. And there's a whole bunch of settings in here. So exclude from display is something you're really only going to use when you get more advanced, but it allows you to add a field to the view and then hide it, and then you could use it later for other things. The formatter, this is where those formatters that we talked about come back in. So you'll see when we get to the date format, it gives us the same options that we had when we were setting up the display of the date. For this one, we're just going to stick with the default. And then you've got style settings. If you really want to get into, if you're somebody who does the CSS and the styling and the HTML, or you do all the development and all that, you can do a lot of stuff to customize the HTML of it. So you can use different HTML elements. You can add CSS classes to it. So that'll really just help with your ability to style the front end of it with CSS. And every field will have that option. It gives us the option here for what to do if there isn't anything in that field. So by default, it's just not going to show anything. But like, let's say you wanted it to say, no description. So now, if somebody didn't put a body field in to their event, it would say no description available for anything that didn't have that. So it gives you those options. You can also hide the field if it's empty. You can just completely not show the label or anything, and then it'll count the number 0 if you're using a text field or an integer field and you don't want it to show with the number 0. Rewrite results. This is really kind of a more advanced field, but it does give you the option to do a lot of different things. You can rewrite the output of this field. So if you wanted to put something in there that just says that no matter what people put in, it would show what you put in this, you could do that. I don't know why you would necessarily want to, but it does give you some other options too, in that you can use tokens from other fields in there, and it'll add extra stuff into there. That one definitely is a little more advanced. Output this field as a link is pretty useful if you have some stuff that you do want to link back somewhere else, like a username or something like that. You could also, this would be useful in a description if you want to trim the field to a maximum length, because maybe someone put like a 5,000 word essay into their event description and you don't want to show all of that. You just create, okay, we only want 300 characters. And then you can add a read more link to it. What did I do? Oh, there you go. You could add a read more link and it'll add an ellipsis. You could change the text of that read more link. And then as you move down, you can get rid of HTML tags, which is useful if you don't trust the input that people are putting in. You can remove white space, or you convert a lot of stuff like that. So that gives you some of those options there to just sort of mess with the data that people put in. And then if you wanted to change the title, the administrative title is just what shows right there where it says content body. If you want to change that label, you can, but that's not something that shows up anywhere other than in this UI. So we're going to apply that to all displays and continue. We're on to tags, and then once again you'll see we've got the link settings here in plain text. We're going to keep this as a link. All these things are all the same as they were. The thing that this has differently, because we set it to an unlimited number, is it gives us a multiple field setting. So that means that you can display it in any one of these ways possible if there's more than one. You can set it up as an unordered list, an ordered list, a simple separator. For our purposes, we're just going to keep it with what it's set up as, so it just puts a comma and then the next one. And that's the easiest way to do it. But then you can set up the things. You can display a certain number of them starting from, you can reverse it. You can show just the first and the last. And I guess I didn't add the date. So go back in and add the date, because I thought I did, but I didn't. So once again, we've got the formatter here. We do want to show it as date and time. And then we want to choose the different options that are available there. And then right here it tells you, hey, if you want to add or edit some of these options, just go to the date and time settings to do it. But we're not going to do that right now. All right, so now when we come down here to our preview, we can see, ooh, event 1, description, blah, 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 tags, blah, 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 event date, Saturday, October 17th. So here's our first event, and here's all the descriptions it has and all that stuff. Event 2, event 3, event 4. So now you can see, now we've got all that data we put in. Now we're actually displaying it in a useful manner. But, unfortunately, well, bad example because the way I put the data in, it is in correct date order. But let's say that I had put this event in, was the first event I put it in, because by default, the way it sorts it is by node ID. So basically the first event you put in is the first content piece you put in is the first content piece it shows on down the line. That's just the way the database pulls stuff out of it. But let's say we wanted to, let's say this event, let's say this event had a date of like November 17th. Well, it would still be showing up at the top, and that wouldn't be quite useful. In fact, just so it's clear, let's just edit that event, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. So I just changed event 1 so that the event date is November 17th. Now, when we go here and we update the preview, or November 19th, you can see that's not really useful to have that event at the top. So what we want to do is we want to say, hey, we want to show our events with the next date first, and then going from there. So basically an ascending date. So we want to change the sort. So we're going to add a sort. So we're going to do this. We're going to find that a date field, because that's what we want to sort by. We want to sort by the date, not by the comment count or the description or image, or there's all these fields that are available. If we were doing a blog, for example, we would probably want to sort by the post date, so that the newest blog post is always on top. But for this one, we want to sort by event date. Now, for our example, we want to sort by ascending, so earliest dates first. Now what we're going to have to do after this, though, is add a filter, because what happens then when we get past October 18th? We get past October 18th there, and it's now the 19th, we don't want this one showing anymore. So the first thing we're going to do is add the sort, and this is something you can, like I was telling you, you can expose things to visitors. So we could actually expose this to people, and it'll show up and give them the ability to change the sort. Or we cannot. So we'll start off with it not, just so you get an idea of how it works. Once again, you can add an administrative title. We're going to apply that to all displays. And now we've got our events showing ordered by date. And now event 1 is down here. And so now, just for fun, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to change event 2 so it's a date in the past. So now we're looking at it. Now I've changed event 2's date, so event 2 is now October 1st. Well, we don't want October 1st showing up on our calendar. That's not useful to us on our events. Maybe we want that on a past events page, but for this, we want to hide that. So what are we going to do? We're going to add a filter. So we're going to go up here to filters. The base filters that it comes by default with when you set it up, and you can turn these off if for some reason you wanted to. But it generally always says that the content that it's displaying, the state of it should be published. So if somebody, when they're editing an event, you know, if you're an administrator and you're just trying to create an event, but you're not ready for it to show up to the public yet, but you're creating a draft and then somebody else is going to come look at it and then your boss is going to approve it before it ever goes out, you know, the publish setting, you know, you just click that to unpublished or whatever. So by default, Views says, hey, everything should be published. If you were creating a page that was only available to administrative users, you could turn that off so that your boss could go in and look at your drafts of your events or whatever. So we're going to add a filter to filter on the event date. And we're going to tell it to only display things cancel. That's right. So dates are a little weird. So let me show you the right way to do it. So when you're adding date ones, that's here. Let's see if this works. I think I may not have one of the modules I need turned on. There we go. That's why. So, once again, like I was talking about, there's views integrations for things. Date views. You need that to do what I'm about to do. And you'll see why. So I'm going to save that real quick. All right, so now when I go in to add a filter, now it's going to give us the option of a date filter, which is what we want. Because the other option, if you were to select it based on content event date field, it doesn't give you the option to use date time formatting. It just does a straight one-to-one comparison, which is not useful for a date field. So you don't want to use that one, and you want to use the date format. Just apply that. And we're going to set it up against this to our date field. Apply and continue. And we want it to show only things that are greater than or equal to a relative date of now. And you can use, if you read through there, you can use all sorts of things like now plus 1 or Monday next week or whatever. It's a lot of different options available. So now event 2 is gone because event 2 is a date in the past, and that we set up our filter to filter that out. So those are really the 3 biggest components of views that are going to be the most useful to you is fields, so you can set up your data in different ways. Filters, so you can filter that data. And then sorting, so you can sort that data. Now, I had said earlier, we can actually expose stuff to our visitors. So we can actually set that sort filter to expose, and now people can change the sort of it. We can set the date filter to expose, and people can now set the date that they want to filter by. There's some other stuff over here. If you're creating a page, you can set permissions available. Basically, how do people access it? So you can either set it up by permission or role. So with the Drupal system, you've got permissions and you've got roles. For us, we're just going to keep it anybody who can view published content. You can set up headers. You can set up footers, so you can have a consistent content above or below it. The pagers there. A lot of this stuff over here on the right is is kind of a much higher level things. Contextual filters basically mean you can pull data up out of the URL into the view for filtering things. So relationships allow you to add some different things. No results behavior, basically what do you want it to say if there are no events in the system. And then you can set up your expose form, and like I said, a lot of this stuff over there on the right is a lot more advanced, so we're not going to cover that right now, but if you have questions, feel free to come ask me. So we're going to save this, and then we're going to go to our front page, and you're going to see now we've got an events tab in our front page. And so now we've got this display of events, and people can come in and they can filter by, they can change the order of them. Or they can, if there was other fields that we had made available, they would be able to filter by those as well, or sort by those. If we want to let them change the filter of the date, you can have it filter so that only things above there, and that would be the way we set up our filter. It's to only show things greater than or equal to the value that we give it. So that would be something we would probably have wanted to add in the label there so that it says, hey, only show dates that are above this or that. So that, in a nutshell, is views. The other thing that we kind of got with that was our block. And one of the things you'll notice is that all of the work that we did on this, because this is our main display, automatically copies over to this. Now, we don't really want all this on our block because it's not really useful to have all of that. So one of the things that you have to do when you add more than one display is when you make changes, it's going to always have this little box at the top that says for all displays. So if I was to make changes right now, it would apply it to the page and the block. I don't want that because I'm just going to remove some of these fields for the block. So I want to make sure it says only this block. And I'm going to remove those fields, and I'm going to apply it to that display. And then it's the same thing. Once you do it once, it generally will stay there, but you want to make sure every time you do that if you're overriding. That's something, even doing this 4 or 5 years now, I still will go into a view and I'll be working on a display and I'll make all these changes and I'll go, oh man, whoops. I didn't override them for that, and I just changed my master display and have to cancel out the whole thing. So it's something you'll be susceptible to for no matter how experienced you get with it. But now you can see, you know, our block display down here is now just listing the relevant info. So we could save that, and then we want to go in and maybe add that block. And it's just available down there as, where is it? I don't know where it is. Oh, view events. And now we've got our upcoming events block there as well. All right. So that is views and fields in a nutshell there. Excuse my ringing sound. So, does anybody have any questions? I believe we got like 1 or 2 minutes probably before the next thing. No? All right. So, this is all my info. If you want to find out, if you want to ask me a question, feel free to email me, Twitter me, my webpage, my Drupal user account, Instagram, whatever. You can pretty much generally find me anywhere on the web as Arcane Adam. So that is it. And if you have any other questions for me, you want to talk to me, I'll be outside and hanging out today. All right? All right.